Getting my exercise tolerance back with PCS, post-concussion syndrome. First off, we've got to establish between the two of PCS and concussion. Concussion is under 2 weeks. So if you've got symptoms for under 2 weeks and they're fully gone after that, you've just got concussion. It is a little bit different with that. If you're PCS, that means your symptoms have lasted over 2 weeks. These could last months, they could even last years if you do not train yourself out of it. Now, exercise tolerance, this is the main thing. First off, you've got to do the necessary things beforehand. You've got to find the culprit of your concussion. It is like a car crash. If you drive a car into a wall at 60 miles an hour and your friend drives a car into the wall at 60 miles an hour, you're going to have different repairs on each car. That's the same when it comes to concussions and post-concussions. So you've got to find your culprit. Is it your balance? Is it your cognitive? Is it your speech? Is it your smell? Everyone's is slightly different, so you've got to find what's the culprit, and you've got to work your physio plan according to that. Now, with the exercise tolerance, it's the same. I looked at it as an unfit individual trying to build their fitness back up. An unfit individual is not going to go in and do sprints from the get-go because they're not fit enough to do that. They need to build a base to get to a stage where they can do that. And building a tolerance back up with PCS, you've got to do exactly the same. So you've got to build your base out, build a starting block and go up from there. And this is where, if you are a professional athlete and you have to do this again, it can be a big mental block, or it can be very annoying or upsetting if you cannot do what you could do before. But you've got to take these steps slow and steady in order to get you back. If you try and jump in too soon, it probably will put you back a couple of weeks. It could even put you back a couple of months, and if you do it incorrectly for weeks and weeks on end, it could put you back for life, just because you are mentally going to have a block then that you cannot exercise anymore. So first off, you've got to create a plan. You've got to find your particular threshold without symptoms. Your threshold with PCS would have been different to my threshold with PCS. So you've got to find that particular zone. This is where heart rate monitors are brilliant. They're brilliant because then you can track what you've done one session to what you're going to do the next session, and you can keep that base. If you're just guessing, it's going to be sometimes hard to find a particular threshold for your symptoms. So you're going to do a particular phase for 1 to 2 weeks, and this could be walking at 100 beats per minute for 15 minutes. I started doing 15 minutes on the bike at 100 beats per minute, so 50%-ish of my heart rate max. That was my first time doing exercise, and I got a headache the first time. So had to find my threshold where I can stay, and once I can do that, I can slowly go a little bit harder. I'm going to do each phase for 1 to 2 weeks, but don't try and jump full zones in full sessions. So if you're doing a green zone session, don't try and jump to an orange zone session for the full thing. I did that and it wrote me off for weeks. I was doing about 70% we're going to say of my heart rate, it was for a 25-minute jog. I was doing okay, I had no symptoms, I was good. I then upped it. I went to 80 to 85% for 5 minutes of that jog. So my heart rate was at about 160 to 170, and this was probably maybe 4 months after I took the hit, and I was then wrote off in bed for maybe 2 to 3 weeks. Booming headaches. If I walked to the toilet, my head had its own heartbeat, and that's because my ego took over and I just wanted to push it a little bit harder because I didn't feel it within the jog, I feel it after the exercise. So try not let your ego take over and just do it small steps at a time. Take it steady. This is where I would struggle, and I would try and push myself too soon because I know what I once could do, and I just thought if my symptoms were there at a 75% jog, I could just smash it straight up and do an 80% jog for 30 minutes. So what I'd recommend, if you're doing a 75% jog for 25 minutes, absolutely fine, then do it for 30 minutes, then do it for 35 minutes. And if that is sweet Then start doing maybe little minute bursts of getting your heart rate up. I find personally, if I was doing this sort of motion with my heart rate, I was sweet. But if I was staying flat at maybe an 80%, then getting up to 90, that's where I struggled. But I could get into 90 and have a little rest, and that was fine. I wouldn't get symptoms after that. But if I did a flat 90%, 80% run for 20 minutes, I would have been wrote off for weeks. I'd say 4 months after my hit. So the plan you've got to take in consideration is all down to your symptoms. When is the right stage to step it up? If you've got symptoms longer than 20 minutes after exercise, you've gone too hard. If you have symptoms for 0 to 20 minutes after exercise, that's okay. That is the building phase. If it's 30 minutes and the light, yes, it's probably okay as well, but I took this as a guide. If I had it for longer than 20 minutes, I know I've gone too hard, I've got to go down a few pegs. If I had it from 0 to 20 minutes, that is perfect. I'm going to stay at that level until I don't really have the symptoms at all after the exercise. Once I don't have them at all after exercise, I know I can build it up a little bit. And if I, for example, 20 minutes on 1 week, I had symptoms of 20 minutes after exercise for 1 week, maybe 2 weeks, but the week after, maybe the third week, I've only got it for 10 minutes, I know I've made progress. So I'm going to stick at that until I can get no symptoms. That's when I move on. No symptoms, I move on to the next heart rate zone or push it up a little bit. I might go 3% harder. I might go 4% harder. But it is, sadly, it is a trial and error game. So sometimes you will go a little bit too hard and have symptoms a bit too long. The first time I ever did air bike sprints, I probably had to sit down on the sofa in the gym for 2 hours after. So I knew I'd gone a little bit too hard. But I didn't only just do that, I did a circuit as well before, so I probably just did too much too soon. But personally, it took me 10 to 11 months to get back to red zone training for 25 minutes. So just before coming out here, it was at the 10-11 month mark, I could do 25 minutes of red zone cardio with no symptoms after at all. And that was running. We're going to get to the stage of MMA, because MMA is a little bit harder, or it was for me, because you have forward rolls, you have a lot of movement of your head. Whereas when you're running, your head's in a fixed location. When you're doing MMA, it's moving a lot. When you're doing jiu-jitsu, you might be moving your head a lot by forward rolling, scrambling, and that is more for your symptoms, because as your head moves, your eyes and your brain have to catch up to it, and they're still not 100%. Doing that over and over again will give you some sort of symptoms. Cardio versus MMA training. Cardio is easier. So what you want to do, if you can do a 60% jog for 20 minutes, then you want to start trying to get up to a 60% roll for 20 minutes. Because that movement of the head, like I said, is a lot harder. And that is because your head is in a fixed location or fixed position, and it is not moving. If you can do 5 minutes red zone running, work up to doing 5 minutes red zone jiu-jitsu. Just like I said, you've got to do this process until you are back to normal tolerance. So you got to do it, like I said, with trial and error. If you can do 20 minutes running, try and now do 20 minutes of jiu-jitsu. But in order to get back to MMA training, if you've got PCS from there, or if it's any sort of martial arts or even sport, you want to do the easiest thing first. So the easiest thing is biking. There's no impact. When you run, impact on the floor. So biking, it is less impact, or swimming. You're going to do one of them. Once they're easy, you're going to step it up to running. Once running's too easy, then you can start trying to work into your sport. For me, MMA, I'd start with doing pads first. Once I was okay with pads, I'd then start going to a bit more jiu-jitsu, like flow rolling. And then when I was happy with that, a bit of flow wrestling. And then once I got past that stage and that mental barrier, I could then start going live. I can now go live in jiu-jitsu 100%, wrestling 100% also. The only thing left now is 100% sparring. I've sparred since at a decent level, but I've not done fight style sparring, and I probably will not be doing that until I'm ready to go back into a fight, because fight style sparring is pointless if you've not got a fight coming up, as I've learned. But that is today's of getting your tolerance back if you have PCS. PCS is if you have the concussion symptoms longer than 2 weeks. And remember, the main thing you got to do is find your culprit. Once you found the culprit, we can then start fixing it. If you do not find the culprit of a car problems, once it's had a car accident, you're never going to be able to fix it. So you got to do a scan. You got to do what are they called? What are they called? You know when you go to the gym and you do a
DEXA scan.
No, you do a first session to see where you're at.
Oh, like a taster session.
Yeah, but you do like a set load of exercises.
Oh,
An intro session.
yeah, like an intro session.
But they do all the testing for all the little bits to see where you're weak or where you're strong at. You've got to do the same with your concussion before you even start doing all of this. This is just after you have done that. But main thing is, if you have concussion, do not rest. That is the worst thing you can ever do. Make sure you at least get some walking out. So that is the first stage of exercise. Even though you think exercise is normally running, walking will get you there. That's the first stage. So if you can't run, walk. And if you can't walk, crawl. So you don't want to be staying inside. That's the worst thing you can ever do. Stay inside for 2 days tops after you've been hit or after you've taken the blow to your head. But do not rest. That is the worst thing I did for the first month and a half. I rested. And that's the worst thing you can ever do. So keep moving and keep going out into those situations that are a little bit harder and taking it little steps at a time. Don't try and do it too big, and eventually you'll get symptom free and when you can train 100%, which I'm pretty close to doing now. Wrestling, jiu-jitsu, I'm there. Sparring, not so quite, but it will be there soon. That's today's video. Bish, bash, bosh, pow!